Andy.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, we're gonna still wait a couple more minutes. Got our chair should be joining us here.
Okay.
Turn my volume up.
Make sure. Issue. Oh, right. All right, great. We got Chief coming online here.
Hello.
All right, looks like we've got the live recording started, so we're ready to get started whenever you are, Chief.
Yep, you bet. Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. You got roll, I assume?
Yes, I do.
Okay, all right. And then I'm looking for approval of minutes for October 22nd, 2020. Anyone with a motion to approve?
I'll move.
All right, I've got Katie Shalley as moving for it. How about a second?
I'll second.
All right, Melissa Biskin with a second. Do we have any discussion or corrections that need to be made to address those minutes? All right, hearing none, I will look for a motion of approval. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. All right, hearing none, the motion carries. We can jump into item number 4, staff report.
All right. So a couple different things to update the group. Chief, myself, and Chris Corpola submitted a grant, just a short grant application, but looking for some funding for juvenile harm reduction and that drug education piece. So if we receive that, we would have funding to really provide that BOTVIN life skills curriculum across the county, which that's been one of the challenges with really unrolling that out, is the funding for the materials and the training for the staff to deliver that. So we should know by December 18th if they like the grant proposal. We looked at some juvenile funding, some housing funding, and then a couple other areas as well. But we should know by the 18th if they like our application enough to really put forth a full proposal. And then we'll have some more work to do if that comes through. But anything that you'd like to add, Chief, on that grant application?
No, other than big thank you goes to you and Chris Corpola for writing and submitting the grant and your willingness to partner in it too. I think
Yeah.
if we do get it, it touches a lot of areas between the the helping of the kids to funding in other areas for treatment, et cetera. And I hope we can get it. Let's
Yeah,
just put it
yeah.
at that. I hope
Yeah,
it happens.
and you did a lot of the heavy lifting on that, so we appreciate that. And right, some of that COVID funding that's coming down to our 10 county area. So if we could get a slice of that, that would be excellent. Let's see, the CJCC held their last quarterly meeting in November. So Chris Corpola will be chair for next year, and then Andrea Nodoff will be vice chair for that 2021-22 kind of time frame. So we do have an executive meeting next week for the CJCC, and that'll probably be our last one for 2020. Even though the weather's beautiful and it's sunny, it is December and things, we can put an end to this year and look ahead to next year. And then the next thing that I'd like to update is Sandy came across a technical assistance solicitation for the pre-trials public safety assessment that we're looking at implementing. So we're going to take part in a webinar next week and to learn more about the application, but it's really getting some technical assistance to help us in that pretrial area. So there's no funding with that, just really getting some of the coaching assistance. So we'll take a look at that and report back if it's something that we think we should pursue or not. The application is due at the end of January or mid-February for the first round. So that's my staff report, unless there's questions. All right.
No, thank you, Sarah. Appreciate that. So let's slide into item number 5. So we have Department of Corrections proposed policy changes to probation revocations. We are fortunate to have Melissa here on the meeting today, and I'm hoping you'd be able to talk a little bit about that if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for letting me speak about it. There's a lot of big changes coming down the pike in the near future. So the Department of Corrections right now is proposing and starting to introduce and implement some new strategic initiatives in relationship to the way we respond to violations and how we go about determining who we're going to revoke and how we're going to revoke people on supervision. So I know the Secretary of the Department of Corrections has been basically going around the state to all the community stakeholders and basically providing some training and education and providing stakeholders with the opportunity to provide feedback and input regarding the new policy changes that will be coming down. I know Dunn County was invited, and I believe some of the stakeholders, including Sarah, actually attended that particular town hall. So Sarah had asked me today to come in and talk to you guys about a little bit of the changes. It's a long presentation. It was a couple hour long, so I'm not going to give you all the details, but I'll give a brief synopsis, hopefully. Okay, so first and foremost, I think we'll talk a little bit about the goals. And the goals of this initiative is to obviously reduce the number of revocations in the state, reduce the number of prison admissions related to the revocations, reduce the total number of persons in jail on probation and parole holds, and to increase the number of community-based alternative to revocations that we have currently, and to utilize data to drive our decision and allocate resources right now. So Wisconsin, obviously, we all know we're one of the few states that have truth in sentencing. And additionally, we have a high number of incarcerated individuals. So I know our governor is big into prison reforms. Our secretary supports that. And that's why this initiative is being looked at and brought down. So there are 5 focus areas of this initiative, and those include short-term sanctions, rules of supervision and after-hour holds, evidence-based response to violations, alternative to revocations, including programming and treatment courts, and the revocation process. And I'll dive into those a little bit deeper, but I think first and foremost, to understand how the Department of Corrections responds to violations, I need to tell you a little bit about the matrix we use. So when we determine how we're going to respond to violations, it's based upon a compass assessment. We completed a compass assessment, and that will tell us obviously the risk level and how risky that particular person is. So then when we're looking at violations, we take into account what the offender's risk level is and what type of violation that the offender has alleged to have committed. So this matrix includes low, medium, high, and very high level violations, and low, medium, high, and very high risk levels. So when we determine how we're going to respond to a specific violation, we take into account the risk level and then the violation level, and then that will tell us what our response level is going to be. So we kind of have a guide in how we make decisions regarding violations. That's how we've been practicing in the past. And obviously agent discretion obviously helps guides. We don't solely 100% rely on that. We try to rely on it for the most part, but that's kind of how we make decisions. Based upon that matrix too, we also have things that we can do. So say, for example, the offender's risk level is medium, the violation level is medium, the response level is medium. And then an agent has a list of ways that they can respond to certain violations. So that matrix, it's not necessarily going away. They're making some changes to that matrix. So that's how the Department of Corrections responds to violations and how we make determinations on how we are going to respond. So the focus area number one is short-term sanctions. So the Division of Community Corrections has the option to respond to violations with what we call a short-term sanction. It can go from 1 day to 90 days we can impose for jail time outside of conditional jail time. That would be obviously have to be approved by the judge. So right now, a lot of times the offender is sitting in jail, twiddling their thumbs with nothing to do because they're not really participating in any type of jail programs just because they're there on a short-term basis. So this new initiative is saying that if we are imposing short-term sanctions for a client and we do not want them to sit idle time in jail, so what they're proposing is that the agent will go to the jail and visit the offender or visit the offender via Zoom in these times and start providing some type of interventions related specifically to their criminogenic need. And additionally, this new initiative is going to provide the agents with some direction on how much jail time to use. So for example, if it's a medium violation, that we are only going to impose 20 days of jail. If it's a high level violation, we can have them impose 21 to 44 days. So it gives the agent more direction on how much jail time they should impose contingent upon the level and recommendation of the outcome of the violation. So then also what we're looking at doing with short-term sanctions, which is really new and it's a different school of thought, is so when we're revoking somebody and they've been to prison before, we send in a request to see how much time an individual has left on their prison term. And then we use a category 1, 2, or 3 violation to determine what we're going to recommend for prison. In some of these shorter time, or somebody that has been to prison a lot of times or has a short prison term is coming back with a recommendation for time of less than a year to go back to DAI to prison. And DAI at least needs a year. So we're looking at, even though we may have pursued revocation, the time comes back and it's less than 1 year, then rather than revoking that individual, we're just going to impose some type of sanction at that point. Does anybody have any questions about sanctions and how we impose sanctions? Okay. So the next focus area is going to be rules of supervision and after-hour holds. So anytime after 4:30, our monitoring center takes calls from our local law enforcement regarding who we're going to place on a probation and parole hold. The monitoring center now has access to each and every offender's rules, and they have access to special rules of supervision. And so in the past, if an agent had put a special rule of supervision on an individual's rules, it's an automatic custody. After hours authorizes a hold. So now what they're looking at is they're saying not every special rule. So a special rule could be, for example, it could be a no drink, it could be a no tavern, it could be no contact maybe with a victim or a drug using friend. So in the past, monitoring center, because it was a special rule, would authorize a hold. So now what they're saying is that not all special rules require a hold, and they're going to put some type of system in place so the monitoring center knows that although it's a special rule, it's not necessarily, just because they violate that special rule does not necessarily mean that a jail hold is actually warranted at this time. So that's one of the bigger changes. Also, with regards to the rules of supervision, they have 18 standard rules that every single offender gets placed on, in addition to special rules. They're looking at condensing the number of rules that an individual is on. So for example, like one of our standard rules is, you can't buy or purchase, make any major purchases. And that doesn't necessarily need to be on everybody. That could be on somebody that may be a financial crime type person, but somebody that's working full time, if they want to purchase on a credit card, they should be able to. And then they're also looking at adding rules based on typologies. So for example, if we have a domestic violent offender, OWI offender, a female offender, those type of offenders will have special rules specific to their typology, kind of like what we do with sex offenders currently. And then the third focus topic is going to be evidence-based responses to violations. So what they're looking at adjusting with regards to that process is, in the past, one of the bigger rule violations was to fail an ATR. So say, for example, judge, person failed drug court. They're participating in drug court as an ATR. So in the past, we would say that's a very high level violation. This person is going to be revoked, and we'd use that as another rule violation. That is not currently going to be considered a rule violation to fail an ATR. They're going to look at it as maybe more of an aggravating factor when they're determining how they're going to proceed with dealing with that particular violation. So it's not necessarily a violation anymore. It's a factor that they're going to consider. They're also looking at adding some to that matrix that we talked about, adding certain rules and violations. So for right now, it's not a rule violation to make a threat to a probation and parole agent. So they're adding that as a rule now, is that is a violation of your probation to make threats. They're also looking at non-criminal violations versus criminal violations. And maybe in the past, for example, like maybe theft would have been considered a medium level violation. And now they're looking at maybe moving it to a low level violation. So they're really looking at reorganizing the risk level and the levels of the violations to make it more evidence-based and in line with the data that's out there. And really with responding to violations too, they're looking at making jail as the last option, not the first option. And we understand, and I think Sarah and I were talking a little bit before this meeting too, a lot of these initiatives that were coming down have been implemented a little bit quicker because of COVID. So, in the past, we may have put somebody in jail for, a felony possession of, just say, marijuana. That would have been an automatic probation and parole hold in the past. Well, now because of COVID and the jail limiting the number of people they want in their custody and their care, we may be dealing with those type of violations in the community versus putting that person in jail now. So I think COVID kind of forced our hands to go implement some of these things a little bit quicker. So obviously, and I just want to do this little disclosure first and foremost. Obviously, community safety is first and foremost the most important thing to the Department of Corrections. So if somebody is engaging in, and it may not be new criminal behavior, but they're engaging in assault, abusive or threatening type behavior, or they're a public safety risk, or they're going to cause harm to themselves and other, we are still going to use those custodies. I did want to say that. And that's kind of how we've been operating right now with the COVID procedures. We're putting those assaultive, high risk, community safety people in custody right now. Okay, the fourth focus area is going to be alternatives to revocation. So what they're looking at for alternative to revocation is trying to allocate some resources back into the community. So I know some of you may be familiar with MSDF. That was an institution ATR facility that we used to place a number of our offenders. They had a lot of programming there. MSDF is no longer taking any ATRs there any longer. So they're looking at taking those programs that were being provided at that institution and reallocating those resources out into the community and having alternatives to revocation be more community-based than prison-based. So that's one of the biggest changes, I think, to the ATR process. And then we've also started implementing what we call a statewide referral process. So in the past, when we were referring to somebody to, like, just say Farm and Center is a big treatment facility in this area that we have a contract with, or an affinity house is a big one for females. So in the past, if the client was in Region 5, which is our general area, they'd be referred to treatment within Region 5 and close by. And then the wait lists get extremely long, and sometimes they're not even available for treatment because the wait lists are so long. I mean, some of these people are waiting anywhere from 3 to 6 months to get into treatment and sitting in jail during that time while they're waiting. So now what they did is they opened it up to a statewide referral process. So the agents will submit a referral for somebody to have treatment. That referral will be scanned and censored, and they'll determine where there's bed space available in the state that we can place these people, so they're not waiting as long in custody waiting for these beds to open up. And they're going to be mindful of the fact that we don't want to put somebody in that is residing in Menominee in Milwaukee if we can help it. So they are going to be mindful of trying to keep them as close as possible. And the final focus area is going to be our revocation process. Some of the biggest changes, again, to that is going to be basically if somebody comes back with recommended time to go to prison for less than a year, we're going to consider placing them on a short-term sanction versus revoking them. And then in the past, I think a lot of agents, or a lot of the way we've done businesses in the past, is if an offender commits a new offense or a new crime and gets a new conviction while they're on probation, I think it's assumed that the Department of Corrections will revoke their current supervision and send them to prison. And that's not necessarily the case now. So somebody could potentially commit a new felony while they're on prison and not get revoked. The Department of Corrections will look at what we can do to address their criminogenic needs, what we can do to address public safety. I mean, whether that be providing treatment or whether that be asking the courts to impose some conditional jail time or providing them with an extended supervision sanction. Sarah, is that kind of the message you received at your training? Was there anything in particular?
Yeah, absolutely. Just a lot of changes that are being considered. It sounds like some of them have to go through an administrative approval process, like the rules, like the standard rules going from 18 to 9. So it sounds like some of those could take a little bit longer just due to bureaucracy of government. But it does sound, we heard from the secretary and really from the top, that these changes are kind of a long time overdue, and our jail population has been, or prison population has been getting bigger and bigger, and that's more of a drain, on our whole system. But really certainly made clear that public safety won't be compromised with these changes. So I think that's just a good message, and it kind of reinforces the services that are available in the community. So I think these changes, they'll be good once they're implemented, and we start to see maybe some more resources. Not that Dunn County is going to get a bunch more resources, but if there could be more resource allocation to our area, I think our community will benefit from it. So thank you, Melissa.
I think we lost Melissa. Oh, there she is.
Oh, there she's coming back. And if folks have other questions, once she gets back on, I bet she'd be. There you are, Melissa. We lost you for a second.
Yes, I'm back. Sorry, I don't know what happened.
I was hoping I could just make a comment about it. And Melissa, thank you for presenting that information to the group. I just started hearing about it and did some reading on it today. And I think those sound like some good reform measures. My understanding is there's some pushback from some folks. Could you talk, are you aware of any pushback or what those concerns might be and how to allay some of those concerns folks might have? If
And
you're aware of it, I think they're good reforms.
yeah, absolutely. And I think, well, the Department of Corrections and specifically our secretary is committed to getting input and feedback. And that's why he has initiated these town hall meetings. And that's why a lot of these policies and new initiatives have not gone into practice yet, is because we're looking for feedback. We're seeking some input. Is there things that we can do to improve the processes? But I don't know of any particular, but with any new initiative, I mean, you hear less revocations, and I think that
Sure.
scares people. And so, you know, even being a probation agent and a supervisor, I take a lot of calls. And I think first and foremost, it's got to be the education piece of it. So people need to be educated that prison and jail time is not the only way to respond to the violation. And really, at the end of the day, I mean, that's punitive.
Oh, we lost Melissa again.
It doesn't change behavior. So we really have rehabilitation. I'm sorry, what was that?
I think you're just going in and out of with your reception. And she's out again. Unstable internet.
Yeah, well, we'll move on, and if Melissa can come back, then we can have her complete her thought.
All right.
All right, so we have our next item on the agenda. And then, so that is update on the juvenile deflection and diversion. And so that falls under, well, our area. I just want to give an update to the group on this. So we've been having our youth response team meeting, which is made up of counselors for the Menominee School District. Becca Merrifield from the Sheriff's Office has been participating in them, as well as our two youth services officers, and then Ms. Erickson from Human Services. And at least in part, I can tell you, I'm delighted that one, been able to reach out to a lot of individuals, juveniles that either are exhibiting some behavior that is concerning, as well as ones that have been impacted by the criminal justice system and have been able to get those folks resources or interventions. And that has been going quite well. We are at the stage 2 where we're going to start looking at identifying the alternative measures for versus like citations or referring to human services for other violations. The truancy piece was a significant one that we were looking at when this Project Whole program was coming to fruition. With the COVID-19 pandemic, the virtual learning and all these other things that really kind of put a obstacle in our way. So that piece of it has been a bit hampered, but where there are problems, there are also solutions and opportunities, and that has allowed us to be able to focus more on being able to reach out and provide some of those interventions or those what we would call the deflections away from the criminal justice system by reaching out to the parents much sooner than we would normally for both law enforcement, school, human services, and then sharing also the information that we have. So we're able to provide a much more robust service basically for the parents and for the kids. And some of the children have shown great improvement. So we're excited about that, and we've been collecting that data, and hopefully we'll be able to present some of that information here in the upcoming year. So very excited for it. So kind of like what Melissa said, that COVID sped up some things and hampered others. And in this case, it did speed up the ability to be able to offer deflections and diversions. So we appreciate all the community shareholders that have helped make that possible. The Sheriff's Office, Human Services, and the School District of Menominee. And that's really what I have for that. Any questions about some of those updates and where we're at the moment?
I don't think Andrea is on the call today, but I know she was interested in learning more about this, and it sounded like it was new to her. And And I let her know that we've been kind of getting updates from this group, but there could be just an opportunity with the deck work group maybe to do a presentation kind of on some of the activities that are going on, because it's sounds like it's kind of reaching those kids too, that population of deck kids.
It does, and we'd be willing to talk about that too. The part of the goal of it was to do the early interventions and help have the juveniles involved avoid the juvenile justice system as well, and try to give some of the parents who are struggling in areas some of the tools they may need to better address issues with their children. And then also in turn, as it relates to the deck group, identifying some of those families that may have those issues where they are potentially drug endangered children, and then getting their parents into the system to deal with that. And then that also has opportunities for like our family treatment court and other things like that for down the road. So it does touch those worlds as well. So we'd be happy to do either a presentation or have a conversation about it in that group.
Great. Yeah, the prevention piece is so important if we're wanting to stem the tide here. So glad you're doing it. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So any other questions related to juvenile deflection diversion or comments? All right. Well, hearing none, we can go into item number 7, the law enforcement training videos, pre-charge diversion program and proxy. I'll just give a quick update on that and turn it over to Sarah to speak more on it. Been working on it, but it got a little bit delayed. We've got changes in personnel, but my understanding is that we're still trying to trudge forward on this. Correct, Sarah?
Yeah, yep. So it did take it to the communications work group last month, and decided that really we can just schedule that with Brenna. So she chairs that group. She's got access to the equipment. So we did have a meeting where we kind of talked about side meeting with sheriff and chief, myself and Deanna, talked about the content that we wanted to put for these videos. Deanna was going to do that part, but she has since left the DA's office. She's taken another position. So I did hear yesterday that they have hired a replacement. So it's Brad Erickson, the retired DOC agent. So, which we know him. So, and he's well versed in a lot of the stuff that we're doing. So I think once he gets into his new position, that we can schedule that. And ultimately, I guess it'll be up to DA Nodolf if she wants to do that piece or if she wants Brad to do that piece. But that video might take a little bit longer, but I think we're probably ready to start scheduling and kind of moving ahead with that to reach our goal of having those videos by January. So so that's the update. Any questions on that? Okay.
Sounds great. Thank you.
You bet.
So let's move into the item number 8. That's our assessment protocol, A, B, and C. Turn that over to Sarah.
Great. And I'll have Sandy join me on this section. So as we've been talking through the months, we've been really moving towards this public safety assessment. We have identified some dates for training, kind of starting with the judges' schedules and then adding everybody on. But it looks like Thursday, the December 17th or Friday, December 18th, that folks would be available for this PSA training. So that would just be something that Sandy and I would deliver over the lunch hour. It'd be an informal training, but just to get everybody more familiar with the tool that we want to move towards. As you know, we did a couple of real brief just introductions on what that tool is and what it looks at. But we just wanted to get everybody kind of that warm and fuzzy, that they really understand the tool and really its predictive features. Because if that's what we're going to be using and seeing, we want everybody to understand what it's measuring. Sandy, I guess feel free to jump in at any point with the update. Because we have had a couple of meetings with some of our neighboring counties, with the state representative, and really just trying to get some support for us to implement the PSA. It sounds like that's the direction that the state is going towards, and they might have some funding or grants available in the future. But they've been having their pilot sites do the PSA, and then they all created a grid. They all created, definitions, and the idea is they want to take that statewide eventually to have more consistent measures. So we might be a couple of steps ahead in that we want to get into this assessment now. As mentioned, some of the big benefits is we don't have to do a face-to-face interview, which it has been difficult at times because of COVID. But one of the major requirements, just like we have now, is that criminal records history check. And Sandy, we learned this from our counterparts in Chippewa, right? Where they had their overnight jail staff, whoever was brought in and held, booked and held for the judge the next day, the jail staff were able to start doing that records check.
Yep, that's correct, Sarah. Right now, I'm limited in what I can do as far as records checks with the current Compass pretrial assessment that I'm using. I can just look locally for Wisconsin on CCAP, and then Minnesota. Anything else, anywhere else, I don't have access to. It's just kind of going off, going by the word of whatever that defendant is telling me. So with implementation of the new PSA, a formal records check is required as part of that process, which can be very lengthy depending on the individual. So in talking with Chippewa, like Sarah had mentioned, they were able to work with their overnight jail staff, providing them with a really short checklist of things that we would be looking for to fulfill the requirements of that PSA. That way, the next morning when I'm going to the jail, hopefully that could just be a piece of information that I could just obtain from one of the correctional officers, having already had that piece of the pie, completed for me. So.
Muted. So, and right now, for our official records checks, it is jail staff that is pulling that information for us. But we only do that with our Compass assessments, correct?
We do it for any of the individuals referred to programming. So if they are in the reentry project, treatment opportunity program, or treatment court, then I have jail staff do that full records request for me. And that also requires that participant to sign a release of information form. So that would be something else, another kink that we'd have to work through. I'm not sure, where the PSA protocol is for that. But yeah, Heather has been my go-to person, in the jail to get those criminal history.
Right, because the name of the system is escaping my mind, but it's a particular system that you have to have access to. Law enforcement does, but we do not.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess one of the asks or conversation pieces on this is from our jail's perspective, about the idea of us doing something similar to what Chip was doing. If we had a kind of a checklist of what to look for, do you think our overnight jail staff would have the capacity to potentially look up some of these record checks?
Have the capacity is one thing, having the authority for second dissemination of those is the other thing. We have to be extremely careful of who those are disseminated to. We lose our access to NCIC, CIB if they're disseminated to people who don't have the authority. And we have to keep a log for a minimum of a year on second disseminations of criminal histories. So we'd have to look really close at whether you have, or Sandy has the authority to see those criminal histories.
Yeah, I think we already do. We have to fill out paperwork each year for Sergeant Ormson. So I think we already are on that list and have approval for that process. Because I know some counties, they actually have approval that they can do those checks. So when we kind of hashed this out a couple of years ago, probably, it was decided, no, let's just have the jail staff provide it to us, but we had to follow that, right, that chain to really show that we had a need to know and that they were properly disposed of. But right, we'd probably need to kind of brush up on that whole process to make sure that we're doing things appropriately.
Right. Ideally, for liability reasons, if you have the authority to access criminal histories or run criminal histories, I'd prefer Sandy have access to that and do them herself. Then we don't have to maintain a log of second disseminations. But if that's something we need to do on our end and you have the authority to have access to those, I don't have a problem trying to figure out how to get that done.
Great. Okay. Well, it sounds like we'll do some more digging to find out what the options are for Sandy, and appreciate your willingness to work with us. So that's great.
Another option that might be available to you folks to get access to the criminal histories is entering a partnership too with our communications center, because they can maintain secondary dissemination logs too as well. And if there is a need to do a records check on a person who's an inmate, that's a possibility. And this is my unfamiliarity with the PSA, so if this is not even a possibility, just let me know. The other thought is to try to jump into one of the other data networks that are not necessarily law enforcement protected, like the NCIC, which is referring to for those interstate indexes. How about, I don't know if you can get access to things like the CLEAR or TLO or other sorts of services that will provide you nationwide hits on potential criminal records or a criminal history. That, but of course, there are costs that are associated with that. There are costs certainly with running criminal histories through NCIC. But if you're running into interference or can't work out the logistics on an agreement, that's a potential option, if that's even allowed with the PSA. So I'm just throwing that out there, and maybe that's not even a realistic option.
That's something that I could definitely look at, Chief, is to see how much wiggle room the PSA protocol does give us as far as where we get that information from. So I'll definitely look into that on our end too.
Okay.
Sandy, are you time certified to run through eTime?
Like 1,000 years ago I was, Kevin.
Okay.
Not anymore, I'm sure.
We have to recertify every 2 years. I just had to do my test the other day, which was really enjoyable. So that's why a lot of this stuff's really fresh in my mind about who, but I lose that. Their criminal histories can be used look for previous convictions for law enforcement. They can be used by the DA's office for recommendation on sentencing, and they can be used by a judge for sentencing. But that piece in the middle for assessments and stuff, I don't know if that qualifies.
Okay.
That's why I don't want to get my agency in trouble for disseminating.
Sure.
And if you were eTime certified, that would make it even easier. But
yeah, that would have been like in the mid-90s. So
sure.
I'm wondering if for the part of the middle, I get exactly what the sheriff is saying, because we have the same restrictions. My understanding with the PSA is those help guide decisions on prosecutions, potential sentencing down the road. Am I correct on that? Or am I like way out?
It's not for guiding on prosecutions or sentencing. It's completely a pretrial assessment to help aid in decision making as far as likelihood of an individual's risk to come back for future court appearances. That's the biggest component of it, Chief.
Okay. I'm wondering if that couldn't fit under, like, for our purposes with the NCI C&E time for an investigative, because it's well, as the PSA says, public safety assessment. If
Yeah,
that can be part of the investigative process, I don't know.
and the other piece of the PSA is, the likelihood of someone committing new criminal activity while out on pretrial release, and if there's, a history or propensity for violence.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, and those record checks, they're important because, Sandy, you've encountered folks that just flat out are dishonest about what's going on in other states, thinking that we wouldn't have access to that.
Yeah, they're dishonest about what happens in Dunn County. So yeah, I always have to verify every single thing. So it's time consuming, but it's definitely needed.
Well, great. So it sounds like we've got some more work to do on that, but really appreciate the cooperation. As far as the preference for training, Thursday or Friday, do we just want to go with the Thursday that everybody already attested that would work for them, or do we have a Friday, any preference, I guess, or otherwise I'll just schedule it.
I think Thursday is a better preference, Sarah, because I know on Friday afternoon, I don't know who else is on the Criminal Justice Advisory Board with the tech, but we have a meeting on Friday afternoon already from 2 to 4. So
okay,
Thursday
that makes it easy
better.
then. Okay, thank you. So we'll send out that that invitation. It'll just be an informal, bring your lunch, learn about PSA, so we all can kind of speak that language. So, all right, that's all for that, unless there's questions for Sandy or I on the PSA piece.
Nope. All right. Well, let's go to item number 9. So we're talking about EBDM work group leadership for 2021. I was the chair of this work group this year, and as former chair for the CJCC, it's been a wonderful experience to work in both groups. I can't speak for Judge Peterson, but I'm sure he enjoyed the experience as well, as he took over for me for the executive group and all that good stuff. And we've got Chris Corpola coming in. So with that being said, what I'm looking for, at least from my end for the EBDM, is looking to turn over the chairman or chairwomanship to somebody else for 2021 and to get some other folks that are involved. I'd still like to be involved with this group and to have the MPD involved. However, I think it's time that it probably is led by another person or given another opportunity. And I'm hoping that maybe one of you would be willing to step up, or have a staff member that would be willing to step up and chair and lead this group and work under Director Corpola's overall leadership. I can volunteer people too if we need some help there. I don't know.
I'd nominate Sandy. I got a couple things on my plate that I'm not looking to take on anymore. I'm taking over president of Wisconsin Sheriff and Deputy Sheriff's Association for the next 2 years. So I got to feel that out for how much time that's going to consume as well. So,
congratulations, Sheriff.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, thanks.
Katie leads up our data work group, so she's committed to sticking around for 2021, so we appreciate that. What about, I know Judge Smeltzer's kind of got short timers, but what are his thoughts on EBDM before he's out the door?
Maybe Judge would like to volunteer. You'll have some extra time.
Oh, he must be eating.
Hearing nothing from Judge Smeltzer. I think that's unanimous.
Oh, yes.
That's the rules, right?
I would nominate Judge Smeltzer.
Okay.
Oh, here he is.
Am I here now? Okay.
Yep.
You woke me up. I heard my name and I woke up from my nap. But No, listen, I am a short time. Obviously, it sounds like maybe the word is out that I'm not running for reelection. So, we're getting down to only 7 months, and and I enjoy the group. In fact, I had a lot of comments. I was going to ask a few questions during this session, but the damn mute button wouldn't let me talk. It's kind of like somebody gagged me. So, but I would say there's two good. I got a couple choices in front of me right now that I think Miss Frigo is not is a nice option, and uh, Judge Peterson. This has been kind of he's been so interested in this over the last time frame, and he kind of is not here. But you know, it's one of those things. What's your opinion, Judge Peterson? One thing that we've tried to do with this group, and I think Sarah would agree, we've tried to spread leadership roles around to get people, number one, get people engaged, and it's brought a lot of diversity to a lot of the discussion we've had. So I think that's been excellent, and it's helped the growth of our CJCC and its effectiveness. And so to pick a person like me, I would say that'd be short-sighted on you folks' part at this point, because and that because I would be not part of the system here in short order. So, I think Jim, Judge Peterson, what's your opinion?
Well, I don't know. I haven't really given it a lot of thought. I'd be happy to be part of the group. I think it'd be great to see Ms. Frigo chair the work group if she's willing to do that.
Well, I've known Sandy a long time, Miss Frigo a long time, and she certainly would add a dimension. And sometimes I think a lot of the expertise that she has, we haven't tapped into that. So I think she certainly has the skill set to be able to do that.
And I agree. I think Sandy would be great at it. The only concern I have is that this, as a leadership group, it should be the principles that really draw people, because we staffers can put meetings together and do things, but it's ultimately the leadership of the agencies that make things happen and really start to change. So and we do have, non-leaders in charge of some of the groups, but I think the stronger ones really have that leadership kind of, that it's just easier to convene people. It's easier to have the conversations and move things. So
well, I'm gonna make a suggestion to you here. This one's kind of off the wall a little bit, but our chair of our Judiciary and Law, Chair Tripp, is somebody that's really engaged in looking at data and wants to get a good understanding of what we're doing. I think, Sarah, that you probably could, shall I say, educate him, get him a little bit more involved. And I think he has a skill set that he would bring at least lively discussion. I think he has a degree of professionalism about him that I think he could fill a role like this, and it gets us back connected with the county board.
Yeah, I do like that idea, because I think that's that would strengthen us in the long run as well.
I think having someone from the county board is a good idea. If Mr. Tripp is not interested, I can offer an alternative. I can have one of our, if you're not tired of Menominee PD yet, we can certainly have one of our commanders who are decision makers chair the group as well. And whether or not Mr. Tripp is not interested, I would still invite him to participate in this meeting routinely, because just from a standpoint of being part of Judiciary and Law, this is just such a, CJCC is a key group, and certainly this one helps guide a lot of the programs. And it'd be worth participating if he's not interested in chairing or feeling comfortable enough to chair.
Well, here's what I'm saying. I would make a motion that we at least contact Chair Tripp to see if he's willing to assume that role. And then if it doesn't work, we can always come up with a secondary approach.
I got a motion on the floor from Judge Smeltzer. Is anyone interested in seconding that motion?
I'd second that.
All right, Sheriff Big with a second. Any further discussion about this motion or idea? All right, well, let's take a vote. All those who are in favor of that motion that's on the floor, say aye.
Aye.
I,
All those opposed, same sign. All right, motion passes. Sarah, do you mind reaching out to Mr. Tripp and?
No,
see if
absolutely.
he'd
I'll
like to
do
start
that.
us with-
Tell them that Judge Peterson has made an order to that effect.
Okay.
Under the bus again.
All right.
The reason that I thought that would probably be, here's an opportunity for us that are involved in EDM and that we can educate those leaders for the county that have, their hand closer to the purse strings. And that's so fundamental with a lot of the stuff that we do.
Oh,
Absolutely.
It's a good idea. It's a good
Absolutely.
idea.
All right.
Great.
All right, so that settles that part. So we are at the end of looking to adjourn. Anybody against adjourning?
so moved.
We won't do a vote. We're just doing it. All right, thank you, everybody.